Marcy's is one of those retro-style diners that's either luringly nostalgic or luridly garish, depending on personal taste. The interior is a sickly sweet concoction of bubblegum, faux leather seating, and spearmint tiles. You don't need to stretch your imagination to picture the decorative touches. Think classic cars, think Star Spangled Banner. A jukebox plays a selection of rock and roll, surf rock, and doo-wop classics. The records are purely aesthetic. It's 100% digital and connected to Spotify. The Art Deco exterior is trimmed with orange tube lighting and chrome. The name Marcy's, shaped from neon lights of course, proudly dominates the roof in sci-fi green. To finish off the look, at the rear of the diner sits an immaculate 1970s Airstream that Marcy's calls home. Whether it makes you grin or makes you puke, it is a quintessential slice of Americana that gives our otherwise plain and quiet town some much needed character. Personally, I consider it my second home. I'm Andy, by the way. Enough about the setting, on to my experience. This is something that happened here a few nights ago. Well, very early morning anyway. I specifically remember it had gone midnight. I'm an occasional insomniac, and it was one of those nights I couldn't sleep. Thank God Marcy started opening the diner 24 hours. It felt good to have somewhere to go in the small hours when I couldn't sleep. Also, there was guaranteed company. It made sense for Marcy to open throughout the night, seeing as our town is just off the busy highway. It cost her a small fortune to place an advertisement on the side of the road, but it paid off, as travelers and truck drivers alike often stop by for a much-needed break. I'd met some interesting walks of life in the small hours. It wasn't all drunks and sketchy characters, though they did make up a small percentage of them. It takes all sorts to make the world go round. And I love people watching, and people in general. To a point. I sat in one of the booths with a cup of decaffeinated coffee. That night the diner only had 4 customers, myself included. A late 50s male and female couple who were having a discussion about the best route to reach their final destination. They were dressed in shades of khaki and beige, both bespectacled and wearing matching Maine, New England baseball caps. They had a paper map spread out on the table, which was pretty novel to see. There was an RV parked outside, which I assumed was theirs. I chuckled to myself as I overheard them bickering. The other was a lone 30-something woman sitting on a stool at the bar, looking at her phone between bites of pie. She wore a black fedora, white blouse, and black skinny jeans tucked into a gray ankle boots. Waves of dark hair sat on her shoulders. She was sitting on a leather jacket which covered the stool. I promised there was nothing lecherous about my observations. People just fascinate me, and I absorb the appearances and mannerisms of those around me. Marcy walked over to me with a pot of coffee. She was sporting a blue gingham dress, her blonde hair tied up neatly in a bun, also a makeshift pen holder. I turned to her and smiled. "Third night in a row you've been on the graveyard shift," I said. "Are you a fellow insomniac?" A smile touched her lips. "Not me, hun. Janie asked for a few nights off, so I'm taking one for the team. I'll be out of here in, say..." She turned to the wall-mounted clock. 5 hours, then straight to bed." "Well, I thank you for your service," I said with a slight nod. "At least you don't have far to go. Out the back door and straight into the Silver Bullet." "And I'm so grateful for that." She put a hand on my shoulder. "You haven't touched your coffee, hun." I looked down and put my hands around the lukewarm mug. I'm only really here for the company and world watching." I turned to look out the window. The street bathed in a warm orange glow, though the world is pretty quiet tonight. "Can I at least fix you a little something to eat? Midnight omelet?" She laughed a little. Tempting. Though I would actually love a slice of cherry pie. Alright then, hun. I'll be right back. I turned to look out the window. I saw movement but realized it was the reflection of the woman at the bar. She had stood up and was walking over to my booth. I turned to her. She had a slight smile on her face. "Do you mind if I join you?" she said, holding a mug of coffee with her jacket draped over her arm. "Please do," I said, motioning to the empty seat with my hand. "I'll never say no to company and conversation." She thanked me and sat down, placing her jacket next to her. I noticed a scar on her forehead, about an inch or so, that ran vertically through her otherwise perfectly shaped left eyebrow. "I couldn't help it over here," she said. "You have trouble sleeping?" "Yeah, unfortunately. Long-term occasional insomniac here." I raised a hand, guilty as charged. "I find it's better to get out and be around others instead of going mad at home. I'm becoming a creature of the night." She raised her scarred eyebrow. "Is that so?" I smiled a little. That sounded weird. "I promise I'm normal." Normal is boring." She smiled. Marcy came over with a plate, setting it on the table. "Here's your pie, hun." "Thank you, Marcy," I said, looking down at the glazed crust and enjoying the smell of rich, buttery pastry and sweet cherries. "I see you've made yourself a new friend, too," Marcy added. The woman looked up at Marcy. "I've been on the road for a while. I need to talk to someone other than Siri." She turned to me. "You really don't mind, do you?" "Not at all. It's my pleasure." She smiled and looked down at my pie. "In that case, could I trouble you for another slice? Best pie I've had this side of Chicago." Marcy smiled, one hand resting on her hip. "If I wasn't so darn modest, I'd have to agree with you, hun. Coming right up." With that, she walked away. "It really is the best pie this side of..." I looked up, searching for the end of that sentence. "You know what? It's the best pie. End of." I was about to dig in when I remembered my manners. "Sorry, I'm Andy." I held out my hand. The woman reached across to shake it. "Beth," she said with the same slight smile. "Nice to meet you, Beth. So, you're from Chicago? That's exciting. What brings you here?" I used the edge of my fork to cut a bite-sized piece of pie. Just passing through, really. I'm hunting." My eyes narrowed. Intriguing. "What are you hunting for?" I ate the small piece of pie I'd just cut away. She leant in closer, whispering, "I hunt vampires." I started to choke on my pie as I tried to stifle a laugh, ending up holding a napkin to my mouth to collect any semi-chewed pastry that would otherwise get spewed across the table in my guest. The couple, who still seemed to be disagreeing with each other, looked over, annoyed expressions on their faces. I held up my hand to apologize, and they turned back to continue their discussion. Beth just stared at me deadpan. "You know," I said, "this is one thing I love about the night. There is rarely a dull moment, even in our humble town." She continued to stare. Her expression didn't change. "So, forgive me for asking, is that how you got that scar?" I tapped my own eyebrow, grinning. "Yes, actually. It's dangerous work, and I'm sure you can imagine. I have a bigger scar if you'd like to see it, though I'd have to remove my blouse." I almost choked again and had a gulp of coffee in the absence of water. "This is a family establishment, I'll have you know," I said, pointing a finger and smirking. "The fuck is so funny?" she said, not a hint of humor in her voice. Her eyes burned into me. I was taken aback by her change in demeanor. I put down my fork and smiled awkwardly. "I'm sorry, Beth. I didn't mean to upset you. I just really wasn't expecting that." She glared at me intensely. I could feel my eyes glaze over as my comfort level dropped and awkwardness crept up on me. I didn't know how to react. She slipped a hand under her jacket and pulled out a metallic silver steak. I'm more than upset, and I think you know why. She lightly touched the sharp point of the steak with a fingertip and held it up to me. A small drop of blood forming. My heartbeat began to increase as it became clear the situation was very real. She was dangerous. Marcy walked back over to us. Beth put the steak on the seat, quickly covering it with her jacket again and wrapping a napkin around her finger. She started laughing. Andy, you're so funny. Is he always like this? Oh, for real, hun? She said, putting down the pie. She put her hand on my shoulder again. You're in the presence of someone special. Not many like him. I looked at her and forced a smile, keeping up appearances. I didn't want to alert Marcy and endanger her in any way. I can see that, said Beth. She gave me an exaggerated smile. You two seem to be getting on well, said Marcy. Oh, like a house on fire, said Beth, her eyes not leaving mine. I just stared back, speechless. Marcy lingered for a beat. Well, all right then, said Marcy. Enjoy. With that, she left us. Beth started eating her pie like nothing had happened previously. This is so good, she said, mouth full. We don't want any trouble, I said nervously. We're good people. I don't know if this is some kind of joke or what, but you can't be pulling out weapons like that and threatening me. She put down the fork. Well, more like dropped the fork. It clinked loudly against the porcelain plate. Andy, I can see you think very highly of dear old Marcy. I get there's a connection, a history, and I know you wouldn't want anything bad to happen to her, despite your disgusting nature. I frowned in confusion and held up my trembling hands. I don't know who you think I am, but... She held up her hand and silenced me. Shut up. If you want Marcy to live, shut the fuck up. Do you understand? I looked over at Marcy as she wiped down the bar, lip syncing and bopping to the current 50s classic playing into the diner. Then I looked back to Beth and nodded. Just as soon as I've finished this amazing pie, you'll say goodnight, and we're leaving. I'm sure Marcy will assume it's because we both have... needs. I shook my head. And for what reason are we leaving? Don't play dumb. You're kinda so easy to spot for someone like me. It's in my blood. Speaking of blood. She held up her finger and squeezed it with the other hand, forcing a thin trail of crimson to trickle down. I grimaced a little. How does that make you feel? She laughed to herself, believing this was some kind of torture for me. Makes me feel like you're nuts. I'd barely even closed my mouth when I felt the point of the steak pressed against my inner thigh. I flinched and felt it penetrate my skin, sending a sharp pain through my leg that made my nerves spasm. I covered my mouth to contain a scream. Funny you should mention nuts. If you keep that up, you can consider yours skewered. I nodded in quick succession. Okay, I'm sorry. She pulled away from me, and I let out a sigh of relief. Credit where credit's due. I've never seen one of you resist blood like that. I'm almost in awe. Almost. I couldn't believe that she actually thought I was a vampire. I began to internally curse my insomnia for putting me in this situation. I slowly lifted my trembling hands and put them on the table. May I speak, please? I said quietly. There was a flash of anger in her eyes as one half of the bickering couple shuffled past us towards the bathroom. It was just a blurry beige spot on the peripheral vision. The distraction seemed to ease Beth somehow. Fine, she said, picking up her fork. Her other hand remained under the table. But choose your words wisely. She tapped the steak against my leg and dug into her pie. Can I ask why you think I'm... A vampire? I was almost embarrassed to say it. I don't think. I know. I'm from a long line of vampire hunters. We have a sense for it. I have to say, though, I actually wasn't expecting to bump into one of your kind so easily tonight. My parents are hunters, too. No one has heard from them in weeks. The last we heard, they were in this area following a lead. So I came to investigate. Now I've found you. It's looking a little bit too coincidental. The world works in mysterious ways. I looked at her, pleading. Please, Beth, I'm not what you think I am. Please. She considered my words. I could see a visible change in her expression. Tell me, how is it you're able to eat pie and drink coffee without being sick? I waved my hands around in frustration. Because I'm not a vampire. The male half of the main couple had emerged from the bathroom and stood next to us, staring in disbelief. What the hell kind of crazy are you folks? Lord have mercy. This is some backward town. He went shuffling off, shaking his head. Beth found it amusing. Yeah, Andy, what kind of crazy are you? 'Cause you sure as hell aren't like any other vampire I've met. The situation was taking its toll on me. I was under a lot of stress. And when I get heavily stressed, I find it hard to contain myself. My heart rate was too high. Adrenaline pumped through me. I faltered for just a short while. Barely seconds, but it was enough. Beth's eyes were wide with shock. She brought up the steak from under the table and held it out. The tip was coated in a dark green substance. What the hell? She said, confused. What are you? I panicked as I noticed the skin of my hands became translucent and took on a greenish hue, my nails stretching out into claws. I held them to the sides of my head as I shook it. Leave, I yelled, causing the couple to turn around and scream. My fear began to turn to anger as I felt my skin vibrate and tingle. Get out now. Beth held up the steak in a trembling hand and plunged it into my chest, knocking the air out of me. I screamed as I fell back against the seat, my chest on fire. I heard a shriek come from behind the bar. It wasn't human by any means. Marcy appeared, her face now showing what she truly was. Her neatly tied back hair had vanished completely, leaving a hairless, scaly scalp. Her arms were covered in dark green scales, her polished nails now claws. She leapt across the bar effortlessly. The bottom of her baby blue gingham dress revealed muscular scaled legs, her bare clawed feet now too large for the dainty heels she had been previously wearing. The main couple were hysterical. They ran for the door. Marcy seemed to defy gravity. She landed behind them and bashed their heads together, their limp bodies falling to the ground. I was a little woozy, but could see utter fear and confusion in Beth. She grabbed another item from her jacket. A gun. I tried to reach out to grab it, but I was too weak and slow. Marcy turned, leaping through the air. She shrieked as she headed for Beth. A single shot was fired. Marcy fell to the ground, screaming in pain as she writhed around. Beth held out the smoking gun, pointing it directly at Marcy. Her hand was shaking. You know what? I said. Beth turned to me with even more confusion in her eyes. A vampire would have certainly perished by this point. I think I did meet your parents. Her eyes widened with terror as I showed her my true form. I clamped my clawed hands to the sides of her face and twisted her head from her shoulders. The fedora glided to the floor. Her headless body slumped against the seat. Her face remained in an expression of terror. You'd think someone who spent their life hunting vampires would be more open-minded to other supernatural beings. I threw her head aside and pulled the stake from my chest. It burned like a motherfucker, but the pain was already starting to ease. I rushed over to Marcy. A small pool of dark green blood formed around her leg. There was a small bullet hole. Marcy, you good? I said, putting a hand under her head. She nodded. I could see the pain was easing for her, too. I'm fine, hun. She smiled. She looked around. We have some cleaning up to do, though. Again. I smiled. Just as soon as we're healed, I'll grab them up. The main couple were fine, by the way. We packed them unconscious into the RV, which I left on the outskirts of town. We're hoping they will be freaked out enough to not come back. And if they happen to mention it to anyone, it will just sound like crazy talk. We're generally not a violent species. Beth's parents were here all right, but they were looking for trouble. Small town nowhere, and we've had to deal with this stuff twice now. Vampires love the attention. They're so narcissistic. Look at me, I'm sexy and immortal. Blah, blah, blah. You won't read about us in stories. We will never be part of pop culture. You know what? We're happy with that. We take the form of humans because it's usually the safest option. Most people don't really notice. But then you get the ones like Beth who are accustomed to spotting the differences. She mistook me for a vampire, but she knew I wasn't human. I understand the irony of posting this here. We are a very secretive species. I only tell of my experience as a warning. We mean you no harm. I cannot express that enough. But there's plenty of room in the desert for those who threaten us.